Welcome and thank you all for standing by. Participants will be in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session. At that time, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star then 1. Today's call is being recorded. If there are any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Ms. Cora Dixon. You may begin.
Thank you, Lexi. Welcome to the webinar, Business Opportunities in Brazil, Trade Mission for Green Companies. In this webinar, you will learn the current status and the future direction of U.S. green exports to Brazil. You'll find out why there is demand for U.S. green technologies in the growing Brazilian market. You'll identify market entry strategies and challenges, and will provide what you need to know about the Export Green Trade Mission to Brazil. A few quick notes before we begin. The recording of this webinar, as was mentioned, and the slides will be available after the event. You will be notified by email. We will have the opportunity to ask you for any quick clarifications after each section. If you could, please try to hold questions and comments until the main Q&A period after all presentations. We would very much appreciate it. It was asked whether we will be able to ask questions during the presentations. The two methods of asking questions is to either press 1 and the operator will enter you into a queue to ask a question, or to type it into the message box if you notice there's a Q&A button at the top of the screen. I'd like to review the webinar outline before we begin. As mentioned, we have 3 sections. The first is Why Brazil, featuring Lori Fussell from ITA's Office of South America and Stephen Vipes from the Brazil-U.S. Business Council. Then we will talk about the green building sector, featuring my presentation and also a presentation from the Brazil-U.S. Business Council. And finally, we will present to you why to join this trade mission. Miguel Hernandez will be joining us from Sao Paulo, and Kathleen McInerney from the Brazil-U.S. Business Council and Trade Routes. The first speaker is Lori Fussell. She's in the Market Access and Compliance Division of the International Trade Administration, and she will be discussing about Brazil in general. Lori, I turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Cora. Hi again. My name is Lori Fussell, and I'm the Brazil Desk Officer here at the Department of Commerce. During my presentation, what I'll be doing is kind of laying out why Brazil is such a key market right now. I'm going to start first by talking about the Department of Commerce, and then lastly I'm going to wrap up with some helpful resources. But the colleagues that will be participating in the webinar will focus on more of the detail further highlighting the mission itself. Next slide, please. So the International Trade Administration, the way we fit into the big scheme of the trade world is that we're helping to promote trade and investment for companies. We strengthen industry competitiveness and ensure fair trade for all companies. We're broken up into 4 bureaus here. Manufacturing and Services focuses on the competitiveness side, and it's the industry experts. We're broken up either by sectors such as energy, service, health, and consumer goods. And under the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, we have the trade promotion angle for our companies with over 100 U.S. offices throughout the U.S., which are called U.S. Export Assistance Centers. And for those who aren't aware of these are a great resource for you to really tap into domestically. We also have offices around the world. Miguel Hernandez, who's one of our commercial officers, will speak later and could give more of a detail of the opportunities that the Foreign Commercial Service offers. We have Market Access and Compliance, which is where I actually fall into, where we have more of the compliance side. We help to obtain market access for American firms and workers who are invested overseas. We ensure compliance by foreign nations under our trade agreements as well, and ultimately our mandate is to identify and overcome these trade barriers. Lastly, we have the Import Administration, which deals with anti-dumping issues. And again, the 4 bureaus really help to promote the interests of U.S. companies overseas. Next slide, please. Thank you. The National Export Initiative was first made public during President Obama's State of the Union address and has really been a driver this last year. It's been a critical effort that will lead to long-term sustainable and economic growth for the United States. Over the past year, we've been making great strides to implement the National Export Initiative, also known as the NEI. U.S. exports to Brazil continues to grow due to our strong relationship. Last year, we reached $34 billion in exports, which was an increase of 36%. And this increased effort under the NEI has actually three arms, which is advocacy under the commercial service, increased access to credit for companies, as well as the trade enforcement and market access. We also have the highest level of political engagement with Brazil that supports the NEI. This past March, President Obama traveled to the country with a number of his cabinet members, where a number of new initiatives were concluded. Some of these initiatives include the U.S.-Brazil Agreement on Trade and Economic Cooperation, as well as Open Skies Agreement. And lastly, most pertinent to this group would be the Joint Initiative on Urban Sustainability, which will allow the integration of ongoing bilateral efforts focused on expanding and creating new markets for green and smart infrastructure. We also have a number of well-established dialogues between our two countries, including the commercial dialogue, as well as the U.S.-Brazil CO Forum that the Department of Commerce leads. Next slide, please. So why Brazil? It's important to note that it's roughly the half of the South American territory. Not many people recognize how large it is, but with over 190 million people, you could really see that the importance of the purchasing power that has grown in the middle class could really make a big difference for companies looking to invest. It's very diverse sectors, and although the trade mission is focused on environmental technologies, I'd be remiss if I didn't focus on some of the key sectors, which include automobile and parts, machinery equipment, steel, textiles, shoes, cement, and iron ore. Total trade between the U.S. and Brazil last year was $59 billion, so it's a key market for the United States. We also have a very strong trade relationship, as I mentioned earlier, and Brazil is living one of the best economic moments in recent history as a result of their sound government fiscal policies. They're one of the first countries to actually get out of the financial crisis, and they have a huge construction boom throughout Brazil. The one thing also of importance to note is that the population distribution is key. 90% of the population lives within 500 kilometers of the coastline, so making it easily accessible through all the ports. Next slide, please. Now, how easy is it to do business in Brazil? It's important to focus on the opportunities, obviously, in Brazil, but also to mention that Brazil ranks 127 out of 183 countries in the World Bank Doing Business report. This report is actually really key to seeing how Brazil ranks in comparison to other countries. Here on this slide, you could see that India is ranked 134. China comes in 43. Again, Brazil falls in between that at 127. The United States, who isn't shown on this, but we rank 5, And of course, a lower number in ranking means that the regulatory environment is conducive to the operation of all businesses in country. Next slide, please. So this report looks at these indicators noted here, the importance of starting a business and how quickly you're able to do that, paying taxes, getting credit. Unfortunately, as you can see, trading across borders, Brazil dropped 16 points from last year, which is notable. Closing a business takes a bit longer as well, but they did improve in dealing with construction permits, and construction has been one of the key areas where Brazil has been focusing their acceleration growth program, so they have made some movement towards fixing some of the delays. Next slide, please. I don't want to get into too much on the challenges and barriers because one of my colleagues will discuss in more detail related to the sector. But again, I would be remiss if we didn't focus on some of the issues. For companies to invest, you need to be aware that there's a pretty strenuous tariff and custom barriers and an onerous licensing and regulatory requirements. This is something to be aware of. But again, there's many opportunities that surpass the challenges, but it's important to do your homework before investing in the country. Next slide, please. Some of the strategies that I'd like to leave you with, if you're looking to invest in Brazil and haven't been in the market, is for you to invest in developing the relationships within country. Brazil is very much a relationship-based country. Again, do your homework and be patient. Things may take a little bit longer in Brazil, but it's definitely an area where there's many opportunities for you to invest. Consult good legal and tax advisors. Again, the tax system can be very complicated, and we hear oftentimes from companies that this is one of the areas where they focus most of their time in. Also consider establishing a local partner. This is very important as well. And lastly, make sure that you're trying to work in the language in Brazil, of course, Portuguese. Whether it's marketing material or just attending meetings, do plan to have either an interpreter or someone who would be able to assist in that. Although many business folks do speak English, it makes a big difference when you obviously speak the language or have the capability of doing so. I'd like to lastly leave you with some helpful resources. These are some helpful links. The Department of Commerce site, of course, trade.gov will be helpful in giving you some background information. We have State Department link as well. And U.S. Trade Representative Office has a National Trade Estimate Report, which gives the impact of foreign barriers to trade. It's just, again, good to be aware of what you're getting into. The Small Business Administration for companies who are looking to export. This is a great link as well. And lastly, I leave you with the intellectual property site on the Brazil Toolkit, which is stopfakes.gov. So again, I'd like to just summarize my presentation by thinking big. Brazil has offered a lot of new opportunities for us. It's a big market, big economy, and we have some great opportunities due to our really strong relationship with them. I neglected to add that President Obama's trip last year, obviously, or excuse me, 2 months ago, was very helpful in getting these relationships to continue forward, obviously. With that, I leave you and move towards, I guess, Cora, will you be introducing Stephen?
Yes, thank you very much, Lori. And the next speaker is Stephen Bipes, who is the Executive Director of the U.S. section of the Brazil-U.S. Business Council. As you can see, he has an extensive background, and I'd like to turn it over to him to talk more about why Brazil from the perspective of the private sector.
Thank you, Cora. Good morning, everyone. Next slide, please. I'm going to be talking about, indeed, the private sector perspective of the bilateral commercial relationship and providing that perspective of the information that Lori shared. Just briefly about the Council. We're a private sector organization. This is our 35th anniversary, and we're dedicated to promoting free trade investment between the two countries. Certainly, China and India tend to be top of the agenda for a lot of companies, and often overlooked is the huge opportunity for business for U.S. companies in Brazil. We have a number of partners on the ground in Brazil that help the National Confederation of Industry, the American Chamber of Commerce, and via this network we're able to communicate to both governments with a unique voice to help improve the business environment. Next slide, please. Just a flavor of the leadership of the Council, 2 sections on the U.S. section, International Paper, which is also John Faraci on the U.S.-Brazil CEO Forum, and then Robson Andrade, the head of the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry. Next slide. And it's often a question that we get asked, why Brazil? And reinforcing Lori's points, it's forgotten sometimes that Brazil is continental in scale. In many ways, a sister country to the United States, larger than the contiguous 48. A good chunk of Europe would also fit inside of Brazil. A few years ago, just by a stroke of the pen, the president of Brazil created a new national park that was larger than Belgium, 5th geographically in the world, and not only making it rich in natural resources, but also as the population fills out the landscape, it's a huge consumer market as well. Next slide. Brazil's only number 2 in GDP among the BRIC countries, 1.6 trillion. Next slide. And after China and India, like Jupiter and Saturn, you look at the demographics, the population, Brazil's number 3 in the BRIC countries at 192 million, nearly 200 million. Next slide. And if you look at the population growth, Brazil's only the second out of the BRIC countries as far as growth, with even Russia being negative. What do all these graphs add up to combined? Next slide. You see that Brazil has the second highest GDP per capita out of the BRIC countries, $8,360. And under the Lula administration, the previous president of Brazil, you had very successful social policies reducing the lowest economic class in Brazil, which was about 30% of the population, now only 15%, and they've all moved up into the next economic class upward, now buying microwaves and motorcycles and consumer goods. Huge burgeoning market for U.S. companies. Next slide. And just to put Brazil into scale, Brazil's got 27 states. One state alone, Sao Paulo, although yes, it's roughly 34% of the total GDP of Brazil, it as an economy, Sao Paulo state alone, is larger than every other Latin American country except for Mexico. That starts to put Brazil into context. Next slide. You look at some of the trade numbers, Brazil-EU, Brazil-China, and Brazil-US. China surpassed U.S. last year as the largest trading partner with Brazil. But you can see that the U.S. runs a trade surplus with Brazil, $27 billion in 2010 alone, U.S. exports to Brazil, and that continues to grow. Next slide. Why is Brazil so hot this year? Next bullet. Economic growth was very rapid. Last year, 7.5. It's continued to expect at roughly at least 5% this year. You've got the mega events coming up, certainly World Cup and Olympics, but often overlook the Confederation Games, the military games, the Special Olympics as well. Those are fixed in time, and with the rule of thumb of project management, you can have something fast, good, and cheap, pick two. There's not a lot of time, so there's a lot of opportunities for companies to get in and partner with Brazilian companies to help prepare the country for these world-class events. Brazil is going to be spending $1.3 trillion in infrastructure by 2022. And within the state of Rio, pre-salt and gas discoveries are making Brazil one of the hottest areas in the world. For those who travel to Brazil with some frequency, you'll know that there's a air bridge now between a shuttle that goes between Houston and Rio, just for the strong connection in the oil and gas sector. Next slide, please. Reinforcing some of Lori's points, for those who have dealt with red tape around the world, prepare yourself. Brazil is daunting, not to scare anyone, but we do like to prepare all of the companies who are in Brazil and look to increase their investments or who haven't yet gone to Brazil to be prepared. There's a lot of revenue to be made, a lot of significant bottom line, but homework is required, particularly on the front end. Lori mentioned the World Bank rank of ease of doing business report, 127 out of 183. Tax, in particular, tax and customs tend to be the most difficult area. The Brazilians themselves will blame the Portuguese inheritance, the centralized legal code, and the overbuilt regulatory system. But they still persist today after many years of independence from Portugal. And anything from opening a business to closing a business to very simple things of getting documents in the U.S. where you could just provide a document or a copy of a document. In Brazil, you need to get an authenticated copy, get your signature recognized. These are just things that can be dealt with, but they need to be dealt with on the front end. What we often tell companies is work with partners, a trusted partner, and you can work with the Department of Commerce to the Gold Key program to find an appropriate partner. But also get good legal counsel and good accounting and tax consulting assistance to build your business model, scrub it down, and run through the different scenarios. You've got what we say is companies need to be ready to dance the samba. Don't build your business plan, carve it into stone. Have every expectation that your assumptions may change in your first year, in your second year, so that the tax rate may go from level X to level Y. You may need to move where you import products. So instead of shipping into Santos, Sao Paulo, you need to ship into Vitória and Espírito Santo. Just be ready and flexible with your business plans. Next slide, please. I leave 3 links here, the Brazil Council, Export Green as well, in supporting the Export Green project with the Department of Commerce, and also our program of work. There's probably about 50 different policy areas that the Brazil Council focuses on, from customs modernization to infrastructure, getting a bilateral tax treaty, any number of issues, and all of those issues the private sector is working with both governments to address are included in that program of work. So that's just a summary of the information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and as a matter of fact, we reached the end of the first section, and as I mentioned before, we will open it up if there are any quick clarifications that the audience would like to ask, rather than wait until the Q&A. So, Lexi, is there anyone in the queue?
Not at this time.
Okay. I'm going to check I don't see any typed questions. Okay, well, with that, I guess we'll move on to the next section. I hope that everyone is enjoying our webinar so far, not having any technical difficulties. I have noticed a few calls coming in on my phone, and I hope everybody understands that though my information was contact information for the webinar, I'm unable to answer any calls about technical difficulties at this time. And in any case, we're moving on to the section that we call Why Greenbuild. And this is my presentation, and you can see my bio. I will not toot my own horn. But it is my pleasure to talk with you today about export opportunities for green building products and all the related products and services that will go into green buildings in Brazil and the prospects for that in the Brazilian market. But first, I'd like to say a few words about the Market Development Cooperator Program, which we call the MDCP. Export Green is an MDCP, and a great example of one, as a matter of fact, we like to think. MDCPs establish a partnership between ITA and nonprofits, such as trade associations, chambers of commerce. We have competition of proposals for the projects. The projects should promote trade and strengthen U.S. industry's competitive position. We only have a handful of these every year, and the awardees do have to match on a 2-to-1 ratio the award. But on average, for every dollar that ITA invests in the MDCP awards, our partners help U.S. industry generate $125 in exports. And ITA is currently coordinating 5 of these MDCP awards in a clean tech sector, including water, smart grids, clean tech in general. So we believe that that's an indication that this sector is one that both the private sector and the government feels has a lot of potential for being competitive in trade. In terms of demand for clean technologies, here are some facts about Brazil. I think that it is well known about the use of renewable energy in Brazil, and especially the adoption of ethanol. Traditional environmental sectors have opportunities as well. Focusing a little bit on clean energy trade for a moment here, we are developing a method of tracking various technologies as well as renewable fuels, and these, according to our latest statistics in 2010, this was how the trade between the U.S. and Brazil stacked up. It's hard to say, for example, in the wind sector, there may be some companies, some American companies down there who may be exporting back to the United States. It's difficult, and also the biomass technologies. I do believe we have a little more trade in that area than it appears, but it's difficult to know, to track because they're not specific tracking codes for those technologies. And, obviously, ethanol, you may be surprised to know in the renewable fuels category that actually we are exporting to Brazil in this area as well. But clean tech demand in Brazil as it relates to green buildings, what does it mean? Well, we think that there are a few prospects we could identify at the outset, and of course the trade mission will help further refine those prospects. But in these areas, energy efficiency, on-site renewable energy, water, and consulting engineering, we believe that there are opportunities, and U.S. companies should try to take advantage of these opportunities. There's been a lot of talk about the green buildings that opportunities from the World Cup and the Olympic Games. This is especially due to the fact that the Brazilian National Development Bank has programs related to the World Cup to encourage the use of sustainable technologies and energy efficiency. There's been a lot of emphasis on LEED certification, and not just the sports venues, but all of the related buildings. There are other indirect aspects as well. In the area, there'll be cleanups, there'll be transportation will be improved, enormous opportunities because of all of the international attention and all of the international visitors. It's a chance for Brazil to upgrade in many areas, and they are, as noted here, working on revitalizing a port, and that through a partnership, private-public partnership, will also be LEED certified. So these are just some examples. In the area of smart grids, this is one in which obviously we do trade in the electric grid power equipment market, but in terms of the ICT that will help change the power grid into a smart grid, these are examples of some of the opportunities, especially when it comes to controlling the building's lighting, the building's heating, cooling, other energy controls. This is an area in which maybe some companies weren't thinking of it as green building, but we'd like to encourage them to consider joining the mission. Now, export challenges, as mentioned by Lori. Even though there is a high demand for green technology in Brazil, there are challenges. Non-tariff barriers such as local content requirements, there's stiff competition even from Brazilian companies, the complex tax system, and sometimes it's just difficult to connect with international buyers, and that's an area that my colleague Miguel will talk about later. I'd like to offer a few suggestions if you'd like to learn more or go to some events, and these slides will be available later. And finally, I just want to point out, for renewable energy and energy efficiency companies in particular, we have created an export portal. This is an interagency portal, including not just ITA resources, but all kinds of resources, USTDA, EXIM Bank, it's everything. We have news and events and market research, and we have an online guide, which is sort of more friendly to the renewable energy and energy efficiency companies. It offers examples from that sector. There are a few products geared towards that sector and maybe more will be coming out, we'll be adding to the guide. So I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. And that finishes my presentation. And we have another presentation. Reeve, you're on the line, right? I'll be turning it over to Reeve next. Hello?
I guess you can't hear me.
Now we can.
Yes, you had it on mute. Okay. Reeve, I will turn it over to you to now talk about in more detail about factors that are driving the green building market in Brazil.
Excellent. Well, I want to begin by saying I'm at the International Sugar Organization annual conference, and there was lamenting about the fact that the U.S. is actually exporting, speaking of exporting green, we're exporting biofuels to Brazil because Brazil doesn't have enough ethanol to supply its domestic market. So we're already exporting green. I chair the Infrastructure Working Group at the Brazil-U.S. Business Council, and in that context have done some checking into the market for green building in Brazil, and so my presentation will be specifically on that. Next slide. The green building market in Brazil is expanding very quickly, and it's already achieved a pretty sizable, some sizable numbers. Brazil is fifth in the world in LEED projects, behind China, the United Arab Emirates, the USA, and Canada. And 23 projects have been completed already. 245 are in some stage of evaluation for certification. If you've ever been to São Paulo, it's one of the largest cities in the world, and it's all skyscrapers. It is a forest of skyscrapers, and it's growing quickly. Old buildings are being replaced. New office buildings are going up willy-nilly, and there is high demand, particularly in the top-end commercial buildings for for sustainable green construction. Next slide, please. It's largely driven by prestige. The Brazilian corporate community is very aware of the of environmental trends, very conscious of it. We saw this in the election last fall when the Green Party candidate took 20% of the vote in the first round of the election. But they're also looking at it from a practical standpoint. Over the long term, the savings on energy efficiency is substantial. Next slide, please. But recently, a number of federal and local legislative and regulatory initiatives are providing additional incentives for green building. First of all, the Tribunal de Contas, which is a sort of a general accounting office in Brazil, has interpreted procurement legislation to mean that the public good is also served when the environment is protected in a public bid. So one of the factors now that government agencies will consider when evaluating projects is environmental factors. How is this playing out? Well, the Ministry of Planning has already begun to develop a body of new regulations that will govern green buildings. All new federal buildings will have new regulations that incentivize purchasing products with a low environmental impact, ranging from water use to how they source the electricity, with a preference for renewable sources, and also using building materials with a low impact on the environment. This extends not just to Brasilia, but you should also think about federally funded projects throughout Brazil. For example, the buildings going up around the Olympics, and World Cup-related projects, including the 10 publicly funded stadiums by 2014. Also, low-income housing is a major program of the started under the Lula administration and is continued under Dilma Rousseff's administration. Billions and billions of dollars of investment, and they prioritize environmentally friendly projects. Next slide. At the municipal level, there's quite a bit of legislative and regulatory activity as well. In São Paulo and Curitiba, Curitiba is one of Brazil's most advanced cities in terms of its quality of life and overall modernity. The local law now requires all building designs to include plans for controlling waste and disposing of residues both in the process of construction and then also after the building is completed, making sure that waste is disposed of properly. There are also 3 municipalities in São Paulo, Guarulhos, Sorocaba, and São Carlos, that have enacted tax rebates on property tax for buildings that collect rainwater, recycle used water, and generate electricity locally via renewable sources, solar, wind, etc. And this is a trend. São Paulo is a trendsetter in this respect, and we fully expect similar legislation to be enacted in municipalities throughout Brazil. Next slide. For U.S. exporters, the principal opportunities will be in technologies, mainly hardware, but also software, in energy efficiency for buildings, controls, sensors, and metering devices. These are items that Brazil does not produce in appreciable quantities, so there's an export opportunity for you there. There's also an opportunity for you to invest with a joint venture partner or in a greenfield project to produce in Brazil. The government will be very friendly to those kinds of projects. To a limited extent, there is an opportunity for U.S. Services exporters, particularly in partnership with local firms that may not have the experience to design green efficiency and using the latest technology. Next slide. This graph in Portuguese shows you how green lead projects are currently distributed through Brazil states. The Pac-Man piece is São Paulo. 66% of Brazilian lead projects are in the state of São Paulo, and I would wager that the vast majority of those are in the city of São Paulo. That makes deciding where you want to target your efforts pretty easy. The next biggest slice is Rio, and the third, I believe, it looks as if it's Paraná. The Export Green program will be targeting São Paulo specifically, and I would encourage those of you who are operating in the green building space to consider participating in Export Green delegation to São Paulo late summer, early fall. Next slide. This also shows you what kinds of buildings are getting LEED certified. The biggest piece is commercial buildings, commercial real estate, followed by distribution centers and other types. So your focus should be on commercial real estate, but be aware that public buildings, particularly after some of the new federal legislation and regulations, will be an increasingly large slice of this market. Next slide. For those of you in the green building space, an excellent first point of contact would be a fellow by the name of Felipe Faria, who's in charge of government and institutional relations with the Green Building Council of Brazil, which is an affiliate of the Green Building Council in the United States. And for practical matters on how to export to the market and how to find local partners for distribution, production, etc., talk to your Department of Commerce representatives throughout Brazil. Next slide. This is my contact information. I'd be happy to take any questions you have, and feel free to follow up with me afterwards if there's any way that I can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Reeve. Very, very interesting presentation. Really putting the focus quite well on the purpose of the mission and the opportunities in Brazil. This is the end of the section of Why Green Build, and another opportunity to ask any clarifications on the presentations you have just heard. You can choose to type your question in the Q&A box. I think I see one pop up. I believe this is actually a question which might be answered in the next section, if it's okay. I'm trying to get it to open. But the question is, how do we apply for the MDCP? But that will be answered in the next section. And I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. I don't know if Lexi can help me. There's another question, will the PowerPoint be sent to the webinar participants? Yes, I believe I covered that one already. The answer is yes. And we have a blank question from another person, so I'm afraid I can't answer a blank question. Okay, moving on. You will have opportunities to ask questions at the very end of our webinar, and I'd like to move on to Miguel Hernandez, who's joining us from Sao Paulo. He's with the Commercial Service, and he can tell you about how the Commercial Service is going to work together with the Brazil-U.S. Business Council to make this trade mission the best ever. It's over to you, Miguel.
Thank you, Cora. Yes, my presentation will basically discuss how we can help you increase your sales in Brazil, and then give you a concrete example of how we did that, and so that you should seriously consider applying to participate in the Export Green Trade Mission. Next. Next. Okay, next. All right. Okay, Cora, are you transferring the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, and so first, it's important in Brazil to actually meet your potential business partners. It's such an important part of the culture, and I think the trade mission here will provide many potential business contacts. Be overwhelming if it's your first time. And here at the U.S. Embassy, U.S. Consulate, the Commercial Service, we can provide a lot of the counseling to help you overcome some of the challenges that were described earlier in the presentation. And also, we do have ways of going through lists of potential business contacts and pre-screening them so that they could lead to more business for you. So let me next. And let me discuss a little bit more, just to explain who we are. We're basically part of the Foreign Service. We're commercial diplomats. We're located in 80 countries. And our main objective is to increase U.S. exports. At the end of the year, we report to Congress, how many U.S. companies did we help, what was the export value, and then we also list how many commercial diplomacy cases or problems were we able to resolve. And we do work as a team because we work closely with our colleagues in the U.S. Export Assistance Centers in the U.S., and I think it's important for you to find out where that office is, because then they can advise you on worldwide opportunities. Next. Okay, what do we do exactly? We basically, I consider us a little bit as like consultants, within the government, because we are looking to identify opportunities that are out there that will, increase the chances of U.S. companies of, winning those contracts or winning those sales. So we do a lot of the market research. We do advocacy, trade events like this trade mission, which Kathleen will describe in more detail. And we are able to identify qualified buyers and distributors. Next. Okay, and so this is just a couple of services that we provide, and I think here I will focus more on the gold key matchmaking, and that's a very specialized program again where we would go through a list of potential contacts that are interested in your product, and then pre-screen it, and with consultation with you, we would then set up those meetings. And in our office in Sao Paulo and within Brazil, we have over 40 commercial specialists who cover, the specific sectors. So you would be working with them to, answer any of your questions or to identify any more business leads. We also do advocacy. We assist U.S. companies when there are trade issues, or for example, if there are any regulations that may negatively impact U.S. companies. We do a lot of that work as well. Next. And here, it's important to start with your U.S. Export Assistance Center, and as I mentioned earlier, because they can provide you advice on other types of missions that are taking place worldwide, other opportunities, and they also can advise you on market entry in other countries. So this is where it starts, with our local offices in the U.S. Next. And then this would be an example of how we would work together with you if you were to participate on this mission. We would first work to identify key partners, and we have a lot of important contacts in the Brazilian business community. We know all of the key trade associations, and so we have a good understanding of where the greatest demand is. So we will first have a list of potential companies that are interested in your product, and we would also advise you on the market, provide you briefings, and after your meetings, which in one day could probably be 4 meetings per day, and we would also provide post-counseling advice and how to do the follow-up to ensure that you are able to finalize some of those sales. Next. Okay, so now let me give you an example. There's this company called Windstream out of Indiana. They started this process by first contacting our Export Assistance Center in Indiana, and after learning more about the product, they viewed that that there was a strong opportunity in Finland. And so this technology, as you see in the picture there, it's a micro wind turbine which generates energy. And so, of course, with the large windmills, they're not they don't work well, of course, in large urban areas. These can fit in the urban setting. And we, as one of the first companies that were interested in Finland, was the U.S. Embassy there. They purchased those, and in a way was able to showcase the U.S. technology because these are very durable. They can face the harsh Nordic winters, and they produce off-grid energy sources. And so, next slide. Next, we later learned about this technology here in Brazil, and our specialists identified potential partners here in Brazil, sales for them in Brazil. And so there were a couple of conference calls, there were a couple of counseling sessions, and we were able to facilitate a $10 million deal for these for 30,000 wind turbine units in Brazil. So once you get, so we viewed that as a success because you can follow, a lot of these strategies are working with the U.S. Commercial Service in various countries, and it could lead to sales in various other countries. And then for us, it was important because it also resulted in more jobs in Indiana. It was a win-win because Brazil also was looking for this new innovative technology. And the last audited figures for how many export successes we generated, they come from 2000. Track record increases those sales. Yes.
Sorry, we lost you for a moment there. Just making sure you're still on the line.
Okay. Yeah, so just what I was saying, we do have a strong track record for assisting in increasing sales for your companies. Next. Here, I included this slide just to let you know a little bit more of how we work with other U.S. government agencies overseas. One of the main complaints we heard from companies is that, they found interested buyers, but other countries would offer better financing terms. And so ExportImport Bank, who visited Brazil, the chairman visited with President Obama, he announced a $1 billion line of credit for infrastructure projects related to the World Cup, and it can include green technology. And so what are the points I'd like to highlight here? One, that the Ex-Im Bank is committed to small business exporters, and they highlighted that 85% of the people who use these their credit line are SMEs, and they did say that their turnaround time for decision is under 100 days. And so what are some of the products they offer? Working capital guarantees, export credit, insurance. So that's important just to know for you as a resource. Another important agency that we work with is the U.S. Trade Development Agency. They do numerous programs in Brazil. One that I'd like to highlight has to do with smart grid. It's in Brazil. It's at a very developmental stage. So there are the Brazilian government, utilities. They're out looking to see what is the best model they could follow. So we worked with USTDA to identify the smart grid sector as one of our priorities, and they agreed to fund a reverse trade mission. That meant that all of the key Brazilian regulators, standards developers, utilities went to the U.S. and they saw all of the technology that was being used in the smart grid area, how it was being deployed. And they also signed an agreement to do a feasibility study where, they can use some of the U.S. technology to run tests to see and to gain data so that they could then make decisions on which smart grid regulatory regime they'll follow, and which again, if they choose more the U.S. side one, that, of course, that will create more opportunities for U.S. exporters. Next. Okay, so just to conclude, I think that the trade mission that Kathleen will describe in more detail would be very worthwhile because you will get these type of meetings with pre-screened potential business partners, and there's a huge demand for U.S. green technology. Just these past few months, we assisted some of the large Brazilian construction company to do site visits in the U.S. to learn more about these green building technologies used in use, because they definitely feel the pressure to meet a lot of the deadlines related, again, to the World Cup and the Olympics. So next, thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. And last but not least, Kathleen McInerney will be telling you all about the upcoming Export Green Trade Mission. And I'm sure you all have a lot of questions. In fact, I've seen a few already, and hopefully her presentation will answer those questions. But if not, we will be opening up to a question and answer session after her presentation. Take it away, Kathleen.
Thank you, Cora. Can I have the first slide, please? The first thing I want to talk about is Export Green and what it is. Export Green is an MDCP project, as Cora had explained in the first presentation, regarding helping companies export. So why does MDCP exist? It exists because big companies in the U.S., they don't really need help exporting. They have the resources they need in-house to be able to successfully get their products into new markets. However, small and medium-sized companies around the United States do need some government assistance to take advantage of the opportunities abroad. So the MDCP program exists to help small and medium-sized companies get their products into new markets. This particular MDCP project is a joint initiative of the International Trade Administration, the National Chamber Foundation, Trade Routes, and the Brazil-U.S. Business Council. It's run by the Brazil-U.S. Business Council in collaboration with all of the partners named above. And the goal of Export Green is to increase U.S. exports of green products and services to Brazil. And why green? We chose to focus on green technologies, not only because it's a huge growing sector in the United States, but also because President Obama has made it one of the focus points of his administration. So the first step we took in starting out the Export Green project was to take a survey of small and medium-sized companies around the United States to find out what green technologies could succeed in the Brazilian market. The target sectors that came out of the survey include energy efficiency, renewable energy, and green building. So all green companies qualify for this Export Green project, and green companies, as we're defining them, are companies that have cleaner technologies or services than their competitors. So it's a very broad definition, and even if you don't fall into one of the target sectors I mentioned, you would still qualify for the grant. Next slide, please. Our partners on the Export Green project include the International Trade Administration, Trade Routes, and Brazil Council. They also include partners on the ground in Brazil, and this is the American Chamber of Commerce for Brazil and the National Confederation of Industries. Also, we can't get out to the U.S. companies quite as well if we didn't have the local partners that we do. And I just put up a list of some logos of our local partners, but I guarantee you, wherever you are, we have a partner in your state, and we work with them to try and bring these opportunities to you. Next slide. A few of the program highlights for the Export Green project include 6 business forums that will be held around the United States. We actually launched these forums in May in Denver and in Idaho. Each of these programs are customized to the area, so that would include experts from the area, not only in exporting, but also in the sectors that are applicable to that area. And why are we doing business forums around the United States? Not only to reach the companies, but also to teach companies about why they should be exporting. 95% of the customers around the world are located outside the borders of the United States. So it's very important for U.S. companies who would like to expand their sales to look outside of our borders to find new customers. Not only that, but jobs related to exports pay on average 18% higher than jobs not related to exports. Finally, companies that have exported have proven to be more stable in turbulent economies, and so it's a good way to find a stable source of income for your company. We will also be doing webinars. This is the first of 6 webinars. The following webinars will provide more targeted information about sectors. So please stay tuned for more information on those. We also have educational resources such as our website and newsletters. And as we go through the project, we'll be collecting success stories of companies who are successful in the Brazilian market, and then we will feature those in our Faces of Trade series. Next slide. We are also having 2 trade missions to Brazil. The first we're discussing today, which is the Greenville trade mission, and the second will be identified and take part in the first quarter of 2012. We'll have 2 Brazilian buying missions to the United States, where we'll bring Brazilian companies to the U.S. to find green technologies and services that they can purchase in the United States to bring back to Brazil. The first of those will be RETEC, which is the Renewable Energy Technology Conference, September 20th through the 22nd. And we'll also be conducting Brazilian government procurement forums. We'll be identifying U.S. trade shows in the United States to feature Brazilian procurement officers from the Brazilian government to speak about the procurement process in Brazil and also what types of goods and services the Brazilian government is currently looking for. Next slide. Now, for all of you companies who are here to learn about the Greenville Trade Mission, we are going to be holding the Greenville Trade Mission in conjunction with the Green Building Conference and Trade Show in Sao Paulo. The group will go from Sao Paulo to Rio, and in Rio we will be having a dedicated conference for U.S. companies taking part in the trade mission, and also inviting Brazilian counterpart companies targeted to partner with U.S. companies for a conference, a full-day conference in Rio. The dates are August 28th through September 2nd, and the companies that we encourage to attend include service providers, any sort of building materials, energy efficiency, companies that specialize in retrofitting existing buildings to be more green, and companies that are involved in lighting systems. This is a short list, but we do have opportunities for companies across the green build sector. So please, if you don't see your product on there, don't be discouraged. Next slide. A quick overview of the agenda. On Sunday, August 28th, the companies will arrive in Sao Paulo. We will do a logistics and welcome reception to go over the program for the week. Monday, August 29th, the companies will attend the Green Building Conference and Trade Show. So the Green Build Conference has a number of interesting sessions that will be translated, so they'll be available in English. We'll also have translators available for companies to explore the floor, so you can go and speak to the companies that are exhibiting on the floor, and each company will have a dedicated translator to do so. The trade mission is, of course, coordinated with the Department of Commerce. So Tuesday, August 30th, all of the companies will take part in the Gold Key service, where Miguel and his team will set up 4 meetings for the companies with Brazilian counterparts to help make sure that you actually gain sales within Brazil. At the end of that day, we'll be hosting a reception at the American Chamber of Commerce for Brazil, where we'll invite Brazilian clean tech companies to participate in the reception for networking and business opportunities. On Wednesday, August 31st, we'll be doing a technical site visit in the morning to, there's 3 different dedicated sites, and if you go onto our website, you will find the detailed agenda that will show you the different technical options. And that afternoon, we'll be flying to Rio de Janeiro. On Thursday, September 1st, in Rio, we'll be putting on a Rio Greenbuild conference, which I think will be really interesting for all of the companies that will be attending the mission, and we will be featuring sections on Brazilian green building market and how to navigate the procurement process, hosting the first Green Olympics in history, and incentives for building green in Rio. And then we'll also be touring the very first United States Green Building certified building in Rio de Janeiro. The speakers for the conference would include the Secretary of Development from the City of Rio de Janeiro, and other speakers from his office, representatives from the Municipal Olympic Authority, and also the Secretary of the Environment for the state of Rio. So there'll be a lot of opportunities to meet with government officials that will be in charge of the procurement process for the World Cup, the Olympics, and also for the huge infrastructure projects that will be taking place in Rio. And also we'll have some speakers from the private sector, including Camargo Correia, which is one of the largest building companies in Brazil, Odebrecht, AECOM, among others from the private sector. So plenty of opportunities to meet the right people to help your company succeed in Brazil. On Friday, September 2nd, the trade mission will conclude with a visit to the Port of Rio, where we'll discuss with the port officials the government procurement options on the port and how they will be expanding the port in the coming years, and how they will be using the port to facilitate the trade for the green building. Next slide, please. So how can you get involved in the trade mission? First, if you go onto our website, which is brazilcouncil.org/exportgreen, you can fill out this survey, and you can also email my associate, Luciana Rocha Goldman, and her email is on the slide. And in the email, just indicate that you're interested in partaking in the trade mission and detail the company that you would like to bring and what sort of product or service you have. Also, to partake in the other portions of the Export Green project, you can visit the website to sign up for our newsletter and event invitations and to find resources and get more information. We would also love to showcase any successful companies who do business in Brazil, so please contact me to become a Faces of Trade Export success story. We would also ask that you tell your friends or other companies about this project if you think they would be interested in participating. And finally, contact us and tell us about organizations in your area that you think we should work with or we should also be including in the process. Next slide, please. Here are just a few links. You also saw them in Stephen's presentation. We also have the link on there for the Greenville Trade Mission, and the agenda will be going up today. I should also mention the pricing on the trade mission, which is for company representatives. We do have scholarships available for the companies that qualify. So we have 15 available scholarships, and those will be for $1,000 each. So before the scholarship, the registration fee for one participant per company would be $4,500. And if you want to register a second participant, the second participant would pay $2,750. This fee covers all of your entrances to the conferences, both in Rio and in Sao Paulo, the technical visit, translators, and transportation. We do have an option for hotels as well. If you wanted to pay for if you would like us to arrange your hotels, that would be $1,400 extra for the hotels, and we'll take care of all of those arrangements. So next slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. That concludes our last presentation, and now we are entering into the question and answer session. I do see one question that came up during Miguel's presentation. The question is, how does ITA interact with us, presumably companies, and XM? Are they a consultant or a facilitator?
Okay, well, whenever we hear of a potential a company needing Ex-Im Bank financing, we refer them to a list of banks that are clients of Ex-Im Bank. So we do more the outreach, the promotion, just make sure that the message gets out there that that Ex-Im Bank has these programs available, and it could be so if your Brazilian buyer needed some financing, then we would refer them to the partner banks that Ex-Im has in Brazil, or you would, but if it's more something that you need working capital for yourself, then we would refer you to the Ex-Im Bank. So we're more the promoters. We do outreach, and then the Brazilian or the Ex-Im Bank partner banks would then take it from there, do the evaluation, and again, the deadline to do a review is 100 days, and I understand that they are meeting that, or if not sooner.
Okay, I have another question here. This is for Kathleen. Does the participant fee already include the Gold Key service, or is that additional?
Yes, we are happy to announce that the Gold Key service is included in the fee. So the only part that wouldn't be included in the fee is the hotels.
And does the participant fee include the cost of the flights between Sao Paulo and Rio?
It doesn't, but we can arrange those for interested companies as well. We would just charge them for the actual cost of the flight.
Okay. And I have another question here. Actually, this is probably up for grabs for any of the speakers who would like to take it. I would actually recommend Reeve might want to take a crack at this one. The question is, how would you characterize the, quote, window of opportunity for participation in the infrastructure build-out for the World Cup and the Olympics?
This is Stephen from the Brazil Council. I'll maybe get the first crack at this one. Well, I'd say closing rapidly. It's there. A lot of money and opportunities to be had. I think the mistake for a lot of U.S. companies is to try and secure the bid or concessions directly with the Brazilian government. It's a fairly complicated and opaque process. I'd say a lot of the deals have been snatched up on the direct stadiums, et cetera. However, there's a large number of opportunities for U.S. companies that form partnerships with the local companies, and for companies who wish to do that, I'd say connect with the Gold Key service, connect with the Department of Commerce, connect with us. We're happy to put you in touch with these companies, the Brazilian locals, who are going to get a lot of the direct concessions, but they're going to find as they get closer to the games that they don't have the bandwidth and they don't have the technology and products and services that the U.S. companies have. That's how I'd characterize the window of opportunity.
Anyone else? Okay. We have another question. Are there any free trade agreements in place between the U.S. and Brazil? And that's a question for Lori.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have a free trade agreement with Brazil, but as I mentioned earlier, the United States and Brazil just signed an agreement on trade and economic cooperation, which covers some of the issues that you may see in an FTA. This ATEC is what we're calling it, is similar to a trade investment framework, a TIFA, that some folks may know and see as a stepping stone to a free trade agreement. We are not in negotiation for an FTA, but this is something that helps to discuss those issues.
We have another question about the estimates per person. Would it be possible for the organizers of Export Green to work with companies to help them estimate, for their own budgeting purposes, what the total cost will be for their participation there if they apply to the Export Green Trade Mission, including things like airfare, hotel, and so forth. I have a question. I didn't read the question exactly as it was written because I realized that the organizers are not that far along yet in terms of estimating airfare and that sort of thing. But if the person asking the question wouldn't mind, if you could be contacted later with that information, you can. If you would like to ask your question again using the queue, please press *1.
Cora, I would, I do have just a quick number estimate for them.
Okay.
I would say for hotel and for all of the trade mission portion, it would be $4,900 for the first company participant, and that is if the company qualifies for the scholarship. And then the second participant, of course, would be less than that, and the flight I think would be somewhere around the range of $200 from Sao Paulo to Rio.
Okay. And so the only thing that's unclear at this point is, and it depends on each company, how much it costs to get to and from Brazil.
That's right.
Okay. So I hope that's enough of a ballpark estimate for now. And again, I encourage you to contact the Brazil-U.S. Business Council, contact Luciana or other staff people to talk about it in more detail. Are there any questions on the line? Lexi?
Not at this time.
Okay. We have another question. Trade mission scholarships, what are the selection criteria for a company to qualify for the scholarship?
For companies to qualify for the scholarship, we're basically, it's a great question. We are basically collecting applications from companies, and we're looking for companies that have the best market potential for Brazil in their product. So if we believe that your company will be successful in the Brazilian market, we would encourage you to go on the trade mission, and you would qualify for the scholarship. So it's really a process of looking at each individual company and their strategy for entering Brazil.
Okay. We do have another question from Charlotte Starfree, and she is with the Sustainable Business Coalition. Companies have been awarded Sustainable Business Awards and would like to know how they might partner with the U.S. Brazil Business Council. Who should I follow up with, she says.
Hi, Charlotte Starfire. I know you from Trade Routes. You can follow up with me directly. You can email Kathleen McInerney, kmcinerney @uschamber.com.
Okay. At this time, I don't have any more questions in the typed questions. So once again, I'd like to see whether the operator has anybody on the queue.
And we still have no questions at this time.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank all of the speakers who joined us today. It was a wonderful selection and a great overview that will certainly help companies decide whether they should apply for the trade mission or not. We do expect, Kathleen, correct me if I'm wrong, about 15 to 20 companies.
That's right. We want to keep it down to 15 to 20 so we can make sure we give all the private help that we can give to each company.
And the deadline is closing in fast. You should get in your application as soon as possible, but definitely no later than June 13th, 15th? Kathleen, I'm sorry. I keep asking.
No, that's fine. The deadline for applications is June 13th.
June 13th. Okay. There you have it. Again, thank you very much for joining us, and you have been a wonderful audience, and the PowerPoint presentations will be available on the Export Green website probably by the end of today, and you will be receiving information on how to run a net replay of the webinar, which will be available for 30 days. Again, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
This concludes today's call. You may disconnect at this time.